I'm going to read you their really cool bios, and then Bob is going to actually interview them. So, okay, Marsha, raise your hand. Marsha Huber, woohoo! Okay, Marsha is an oddball, eclectic learner, teacher, and researcher. Currently, she serves as the Director of Research at the Institute of Management Accountants, a nonprofit organization with 140,000 members in 35 countries. Marsha just joined the IMA after 30 years serving as an accounting professor at Youngstown State University and Otterbein University, both in Ohio. Marsha is the recipient of the Cook Prize, the top award for superior teaching in the U.S. And I had to chuckle that she wrote that she was the recipient of one award, because she's, I mean, like, we would be here until midnight if we just read the titles of the awards that this lady has gotten. She's known for her innovation in education and happiness research. At the IMA, Marsha will serve as a thought leader. She's a bit of a mad scientist, conducting lab experiments in neuroaccounting, and a bit edgy with her recognized research on serendipity. Her next major project will be a study on the Great Resignation. Martha has 4 master's degrees, poor thing. 2 from Ivy League schools in journalism, positive psychology, creativity, and change leadership, and business. And she has her PhD from Ohio State University and is a CPA. So she's not really very accomplished, but whatever. Okay, Vibeke, raise your hand. Okay. Yay for Vibeke. Vibeke was adopted from Korea when she was 3 months old, and then grew up in Norway. From being a professional dancer to becoming an entrepreneur, she has experienced the blood, sweat, and tears of diligent effort. However, at the end of the day, she built up her own successful business and ministry that has impacted many lives. Vibeke has been an award-winning franchise owner, a TV host for faith-based TV, award-winning sales agent for IT, director of sales and online marketing. She loves to play with her son, Judah, and cook healthy food. Together with her husband, they both have a huge passion to help end child sex trafficking. Susan McClung, raise your hand. Woohoo! Susan is a wife, mother, and master ball juggler extraordinaire. I added that statement because she's a really good friend and I know that. Susan holds a BA in elementary education, taught 3rd grade before becoming a mother to 8 wonderful children whom she homeschools. Raise your hand, oldest wonderful child. She and Peter, her husband, are passionate about family and entrepreneurship as a family. They run a business called The Jump, which is in a season of great morphing, which all of their kids have been a part of. So cool. Okay, Rachel Cohen. From growing up as the youngest of 9 in a family business, innovation and creation have been fierce drivers behind everything Rachel has done. As she currently runs her own branding agency and a teddy bear business that gives back to kids going through trauma called My Bear Jeff, she's learned the importance of doing work that matters. Being a faith-based entrepreneur, Rachel's excited about bringing change and joy to the workplace and the next generation of little leaders. So, wow, honey, wow. Who are these people?
I know. We got some rock stars up here.
We do.
All right, so we're going to just dive in and kind of hear more. And so, yeah, feel free to pipe in, but I'm going to go one at a time here, and we'll start with Marsha. So, Marsha, we've known each other since, I think, 2005 or something. Is that right? So let her have the mic here, if you don't mind.
Thanks.
And so I've walked through this journey with you for quite some time.
Yes.
And you were just a CPA, pretty burned out, whatever.
Yes.
And you got really, you really found the Holy Spirit, having known God, but you started having a lot of fun and kind of coming up with all these crazy mad scientist ideas. And you started getting all these research grants and started meeting with all these thought leaders in the academic world and started doing all these grants and things. And so just talk a little bit just about your journey.
Yeah. Well, when I met Bob, I was a unhappy professor CPA. And I was doing a lot of work, who knows. But I learned that God had something for us in the workplace. When I came up in church, I just thought, well, the highest thing is to be a minister, and if you weren't a minister's wife, you kind of failed. So when I learned that, God started giving me dreams.
Literal
dreams that guided my future through everything. Oh my gosh, it made me so happy, and God would set a vision before me when things would happen, and people around me didn't appreciate my work. I mean, my colleagues did not appreciate my work. But I went with my heart, so I would do these weird projects, and then they would get recognized, and then I'd win these awards.
Give one example of a weird project.
Okay, neuroaccounting. So we put an EEG on accounting students' heads.
So an EEG is like medical device measurement. So you're measuring their brain waves and their heart and stuff, right? As they do accounting. Okay.
Yeah, well, we're trying to measure knowledge. We're going to see if an EEG can capture knowledge. Another way to capture if someone's brain's developed outside of testing. So that's what we created a ruse. We were asking people to do this memorization, but in the memorization task, there was something wrong, randomly placed wrong. And we want to know if these students could notice it and what year of their education. So the freshmen, sophomores that just took one course could not notice it because the EEG measures surprise. So they did not notice it, but the juniors and seniors did. They would see this thing that's wrong because being an accountant, you have to notice things that are wrong. And so this is a development of knowledge and expertise, and we found it. So we saw, and so the idea behind a lot of people try to shortcut education. Can you really shortcut it? Because knowledge develops over time. And so we have we have a second one where we're going to measure number sense. Do accountants have number sense versus people who aren't? And something called mental accounting, when people fool with numbers. Can we teach people out of mental accounting? For example, you have a loss of $10,000, but you divide into two $5,000 losses, and then it's not noticed by the accountants. So we're going to try and reverse the training to see if we can reverse train people not to be fooled by manipulation.
So you just come up with this stuff, and so talk about the latest one. I don't think I've heard this one about serendipity. So talk about
the serendipity study is a lot of fun. It actually comes from one of my friends. She knows I'm weird.
So what does serendipity mean for those of us that are less?
It's like random events that lead to something positive and good. And do people have it? So some people think they don't have it. Like I had a friend tell me that was the most stupid thing he ever heard of, anyone researching, and then it was everywhere. He told me 6 months later, Marsha, it's everywhere.
Random events that add up to something good.
Every accountant had their story of serendipity in either finding fraud or serendipity in how they found their career. And we're teaching students, don't pass by random experiences in your life. You need to evaluate them and see if you should go with it. And all of a sudden, my students would start writing, gee whiz, I heard about this opening, and then I followed it up. Or serendipity in even preparing someone's taxes. We had students write about serendipitous experiences in preparing taxes and for clients at school. And it was fascinating because it's called social learning. Not only were the people coming to have taxes prepared learn from them, but our students were learning about life in another class. So you got all this DEI stuff, but actually we just wrote a DEI article. Just send it in.
So isn't serendipity just another way of saying a divine appointment?
Exactly.
So you basically secularized.
Exactly.
You've got all these non-Christians talking about how God is working in their lives.
And it is God because I learned from you. God is working everywhere and for the betterment of everything. And I'm like, my gosh, God is in all these people's lives. And then
they don't recognize it.
Yeah,
so you're making them pay attention.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And people are like, oh my gosh, the serendipity thing. So yes,
okay.
It's God's interactions in everybody's lives.
So talk about happiness, because you've studied happiness quite a bit too.
Yes, I'm a well-being researcher. It's a lot of fun. My first work, I actually was told to stop by my employer, and so I only got so far. I got a cover of a magazine, a big accounting magazine, about happiness, but actually, if you get down to it, you cut through the is it chase, or whatever it is. But when you get down to it, happiness is when you're in your calling. It's with secular people when they're in their calling and they get through this building stage. And so the thing I learned
is... So again, you've secularized finding your calling in God, your divine purpose.
Your divine purpose. But there's also that part, like young people are promised so much when they get out of school. Oh, you're going to get this job and blah, blah, blah. But actually when you get out of school, it's hard. And you have to career build. But there's another thing coming. And that is when you actually enter into that place where you enter into the calling, the thing you're passionate about. Even, you hear these stories here. Nobody was like, came out of school and now I have my, my decorating, fixing, beautifying places when the, person comes out. So yes, this is, it's really, really cool about the happiness. And I did COVID research as well. And the people that were the happiest, and they weren't the Christians. The Christians had the least negativity. I can say that. Statistically significant, least negativity. But the people that are happiest were the people that were creative and then actually knew positive psychology concepts, which as Christians we should all know. We should know about happiness, right? And peace and awe and all those things. We should be the happiest people around if we would live in it. But these people who learn these techniques are actually happy. But the creativity thing was my big finding, that if you can enter into that and that original design, as you get closer to how God created you, you will be happier than
So as
the
you
rest.
get close, so say it again. So as you get close to original design,
Yes.
you get happy, which is you find your divine purpose. You start
Yes.
walking in the way you've been
Yes.
created.
And then you're happy.
Yeah. So
Yes.
so talk about the Holy Spirit, because I think if there's something to me that is so extraordinary about you, Marsha, is your journey with the Holy Spirit. I mean,
Yes.
you have this incredible relationship with the Holy Spirit. And even though you're, operating with all these left brain accountants and all this left brain world, and, you're just so at home bringing God in and into the secular world and making God lovely and acceptable to people. And so just talk about the Holy Spirit and how you operate.
Well, the Holy Spirit is always challenging me. It's great. And it speaks to me through the dreams again. I'm a person, when I don't know what to do, I ask the Holy Spirit for a dream, and he gives it to me.
Every time.
Every time. Yeah. And I've had challenging situations, like someone didn't want me to get tenure and made up a rumor I was a stalker. Yeah. Yes. I mean, you see that stuff on the news, right? That was when that one justice was going through thing. I was going through the same thing at the same time. There's no proof, no evidence. She turned people against me. One person wanted an investigation. Said there needs to be an investigation. I said, of what? Of what? Of what? And it wasn't until after the tenure vote meeting that the school attorney sent out a notice after the vote saying, Dr. Huber is not guilty. There's no evidence to support these allegations. But it didn't matter. The vote happened. And people voted against me on a lie. But the Lord gave me dreams. The Lord gave me a dream, and he took me, I was buying some nuts, and I was up there, and I had this box of nuts. And the Lord said, the nuts are contained. He said, only you can open the box, and it's going to cost you a lot more than you think if you open that box. And I forgave. Never pursued the liars.
So the nuts meaning so the lies are contained. Don't open that and don't confront that. And it'll cost you too much if you do.
Yes.
Just, it's contained. I've got it controlled.
Yes.
Don't play the enemy's game.
Right. And so many things like that, God would give me a dream. Even before I went to the school I went to, the welcome sign was torn. So the first, second week there, people ran to my chair to tell him to tell me to shut up. All I did was answer a question in a meeting like this. And I had just started University of Pennsylvania, the positive psychology program, and I saw these amazing professors, and it lifted my vision. They were angry. And that chair came to me and said, these people want you to shut up. You need to shut up. I'm like, you should tell them to shut up. I'm the new person. And I had a lot of spunk back then. And But the thing that amazed me was the Lord gave me a dream. The welcome sign was torn. So I was more amazed at, oh my gosh, God showed me this was going to happen. And the welcome sign is torn. And through everything I went through, the Lord showed me at the end of it all, I was going to end up at the Thanksgiving buffet with my dean at the checkout counter. And another friend, Christian, who has been around, had a dream that I would be offered a position that was going to be so good, it was going to be astounding, and that I should not waver in my decision. If I did, I would end up in a storm. And this is 11 years ago, and I would barely recover. And it was a speaking writing position. 11 years. So I held on to that through every trial, everything that happened to me, every accusation, because God gave that to me. And then I just started a new job 3 months ago. Number one, my university offered me, faculty, $100,000 to leave. Okay, that's pretty enticing, to leave, to go to another job. And this other job popped up, and I also owed my school a year from a sabbatical, and my school forgave that. They had an announcement, and I applied for the job, and I had to let my school know in 45 days or something if I was leaving. And these people worked with me, and they said, in fact, the person interviewed me, and I don't know how, but the woman who interviewed me, she goes, Marsha, I didn't even need to talk to you. I knew we wanted you. We want you for all the weird things I've done, followed my heart passions, all the things they told me in my school they didn't want me to do. I obeyed them to a certain extent, and finally, when I got full professor, I said, I've got a journalism degree so I could communicate with people. It was in my heart. It seemed crazy, but I got it. It opened doors. It taught me things. And for that reason, my boss said, you know, I knew they wanted me. And I had a price in my head. I got the price. I wanted a certain amount of vacation. I got a week extra. And I got more pay. And we have the reach to 900,000 accountants in the country.
Awesome.
So, you know, but it's these dreams. It's the same. It's that relationship.
Okay. So last
Yeah.
question.
Yes, okay.
Single woman.
Yes, I am.
It doesn't seem like it's held you back.
No. No, it hasn't. It's, you know, I hope if there's anyone single, and I've inspired some single women. Yeah, it never bothered me to be single. And I had a lot of hard lessons to learn. I took care of my mother for 8 years when she became an invalid for 4 of them. I mean, you know, I think those lessons are the work in me thing that worked in many mothers. And that's good. But no, I've not been bothered by being single at all.
So what would you say to single Christian women?
You could follow what the passion God puts in your heart. And don't let anyone talk you out of it. And sometimes God gives you what you want and you don't want it. Like I built a business. I was a CPA, I built a business. It was like God had to get all this ego out of me and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, this just wasn't what I thought it would be. So, you know, that's the thing. I mean, I don't know. Maybe someday I will get married. Who knows? But
That's awesome.
I'm not against it.
Let's give Marsha a hand.
Thank you so much.
All right. Rachel, so we've known you for a little while. So you're doing so much. And so tell us a little bit about your branding agency and your passion for that.
So I, like Deborah, I'm blanking on names. I've only known her for like 5 years. Wow. Okay. So I grew up in a family business, and we didn't grow up with people our own age. We grew up with other entrepreneurs and executives and CEOs, and that's who I was around, and I didn't know how to relate to people my own age. And so I saw in business that, like, the good and honest ways to do business, and then I saw the really wrong ways. And from a young kid, I was like, I'm going to go and be an entrepreneur and do things with impact before this social good thing was this big fad. And so that was the whole thing of me starting doing branding, is wanting to represent companies that were really honest but didn't know how to get their name out there, and just didn't have the skill set or the resources to do it right and for it to look pretty. And so I started that really going down to the story of why these entrepreneurs started their businesses, and all of this was faith-based, but 99%
I mean,
of my...
isn't it like you're uncovering their design and like their divine original design, and it's this
Right.
Holy Spirit kind of deal with you, right? Where you're like, God, tell me who they really are and what their original design is, and then when you're doing branding, you're just revealing that.
Yeah, it was really cool. I used to do all these workshops and all these things, and I would get into a room with doctors, which is so funny. We're sitting next to each other. We could not be more opposite on our education. I dropped out of high school at 9th grade, and I didn't go to college, and so I got my GED because I just did it. So, but what were we talking about? I'm sorry.
I don't remember. Okay.
Oh, I know what I was saying.
Divine calling. So bring
yeah,
me
so
forth the
I
brain.
would. Welcome to my brain.
My brain.
So, well, I would get into a room with these doctors, and I was like so nervous out of my brain and like my mind, because I wasn't educated around this stuff and the processes that I was walking them through. And I'd be like, God, you better show up, because I'm going to look like a fool here, and they're paying me money. And I will never forget one doctor in particular. She was an ER doctor, and I got her in the room, and I was like, oh, lovely. Like, she's very intense, and I can be intense, but I can't match your intensity because you're on another level. And So I was like, okay, I'm gonna crack her. And I will never forget, she was like, I'm about to have a panic attack. And she like had to step out and use the bathroom because she was so used to being identified as this doctor that she forgot how to be a person. And
So you
it was
were able
really
to unlock
powerful.
her true identity for her
Right.
and
Yeah.
bring that forth in a brand. So
Yep.
it's a calling to help other people in their calling.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So talk about the bear business too.
Yeah, so that's a big long story, but I went to Southeast Asia for my outreach for YWAM, and yeah, go YWAM, and I saw a lot of trauma when I was there, a lot of childhood trauma, and I came back and I was like, this isn't right. Like, what am I going to do about this? Like a lot of people do, but I got really close to these kids, and it was just my mission to make it back there, and so I was in the middle of figuring this out, going through my own PTSD from the trip because it was just literally an absurd trip. And I started Instagram as a joke with this gigantic Costco bear, Jeff. And it caught on, and I was just thinking maybe this is a way to reach these kids and to support these kids. So I had the idea like 4 years before, or no, math is difficult. I'm sorry, you're probably better at this. Anyway, I had the idea in like 2016 to do a buy one, give one teddy bear business, just like Tom's Shoes. Sat on the idea, and it's so interesting listening to Nicole because I sat on this idea for like 3 years, and people would ask me, if you were on your deathbed, what would you do? I'm like, oh, like I would definitely start that business.
Start the bear business.
So 2020, no, 2019, again, numbers. I started getting curious about the business, and I openly shared part of my story to some people and really felt released into it. So I got curious. It was all insane. The only experience I have with toys and stuffed animals is being a kid, so which we all have been there. And yeah, I landed this manufacturing partner. That's a weird, wild story. And he's like, well, you have to place an order of 5,000 bears. I'm like, I don't know if this business is going to be sustainable. I don't know any of these things. So anyway, ended up running a Kickstarter campaign. Again, I didn't know what I was doing. It was a pretty dumb time probably to do it, but the Kickstarter campaign was successful, and COVID happened. So we ran into like 6 months of delays with it, and then a few months after that, I had a pretty bad brain injury that set me out for about 8 months.
So really still on the road to recovery, but
Right.
getting back. And
Yeah,
so again, and so we could talk more about your business, but I want to just shift gears. So, single woman again.
yeah, maybe, yes.
Maybe, okay.
I am.
Yeah. And grew up in a very, very conservative Christian family, right? Christian upbringing, where kind of more very traditional views of women, right? So talk about that, and talk about your journey from there and the challenges that you kind of the morphing that you've had to gone through, and kind of where you're landing today.
Yeah, so to give some backstory, so I'm the youngest of 9 kids, and we grew up Mennonite.
Which is
If
kind of
you're
like
familiar
Amish.
with
It's
the-
super,
basically, yeah.
very, very old
And
school.
we weren't liberal Mennonite. We were basically equivalent to Amish Mennonite. So ultra conservative. That's all I knew. I literally was like, I think there's like 10 people in the world that aren't Mennonite. That was my perception of it. So I was like, anyway. So we were in this world, and like, I don't know. I was probably just like clueless because I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is what I do with my life. But in that is so much heavy legalism, and I was fortunate to be really young when we left, so I didn't run into a lot of it. But I do remember like the women getting really shut down. Like the women would sit on one side, men would sit on the other side. If you were a kid and you misbehaved, you'd probably get your head smacked against the whatever they are, the things. But women were very shut down, and you had no voice. And so my family, we're half-blooded Jew, and we are very, very intense and very vocal sometimes. And so that's just interesting, like even looking back now. But yeah, they tried to shut us down, and again, I was pretty young, so I don't remember a lot
So
of it. But
has it affected you much in your journey since? You know, did you find there was just real challenges for you to overcome that and find your voice and find your uniqueness and your value?
I don't know. Honestly, maybe this is really immature of me to say. I have 5 brothers as well, and I think everybody brings so much to the table that I never saw it as like us versus them. And so in this whole, like, even like some of these conversations, I'm like, oh, that's a thing.
So you never felt really shut down in a major way?
I felt shut down in a very different way being the youngest of 9 kids.
Gotcha.
I will say, being a woman in itself, like I have run into that in business as myself, and I've definitely gotten the mansplaining and stuff like that. And I usually just fire those clients. But yeah, so I don't know that I've necessarily, because of that, like run into anything. I think maybe I have subconsciously and just didn't really pay attention to it and just decided to overcome it. I don't know. I really respect men and what they bring to the table, especially in business. And I'm like, God, why are you so natural with this? My brain can't function like that. So I've never seen it as us versus them.
Right.
And maybe I'm clueless to the world, and that's a very good possibility. But so yeah, there's that.
So what would you say to young single women who are, you know, just starting their careers and their lives?
I mean, I think if there's something that you've always wanted to do, step out and do it. Being single and having multiple businesses is not a cakewalk. It is very challenging. But I do think that courage is such a thing. I think to stay courageous and stay curious, that's probably the best gifts that you can give yourself in your life. So, yeah, also, don't be dumb, you know. Or maybe be dumb. So.
All right.
My words of
Let's
wisdom
give
aren't
Rachel
really.
a big hand. Thank you so much. So Vibeke, who is Norwegian, so greet us in Norwegian.
Hei, alle sammen.
It sounded like you said hi, someone.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Deborah might understand a little bit.
So you had such a unique journey. You got saved. You were atheist, I believe, right? And got saved, radically saved, and became this kind of super intense, Jesus-loving, Bible-banging kind of Christian,
Yeah.
right?
The first years after my salvation, I was like this radical preacher on the street, on the bus, everyone, is heaven or hell? Do you know that? So, but it's kind of balanced out a few years later.
Sounds like something Christina was telling us last night, right? Just so really intense, and you were very much, I'm going to be a preacher. I'm going to never be married. Probably I'm going to be martyred for Jesus, right? So
Yeah.
talk about your approach to life.
Well, I was just, 26 years old when I was saved, and I was radically saved. I was so longing for the truth and love, and came out from being professional dancer, working on TV, traveled to Paris. And for those that have been more in the, performance mountain in the world, it's like very hard pressure, a lot of training, a lot of sex pressure. So when I was 26 years old and got saved, I was just like, oh my God, like I'm going to be a nun. I'm never going to be married. And this is the best thing ever. And I'm just, was so burned out from being in the front. So I made a commitment to myself when I was saved that I don't want to be married. I'm going to sit behind a chair. I'm never going to be in front. I'm going to just pray, and that's my life.
But I see a ring on your finger.
Yeah, so it's kind of your guys' fault, because you invited us here in, 2012. Yeah. We had the Joseph International over for 4-5 times in Norway. And then 2012 came over here, met a guy, and fell in love. And
It's a slippery slope. It's
Yes.
a slippery slope. so you have wonderful family and wonderful husband and very consuming, and so your faith looks a whole lot different now
It looks
than it
very
did
different.
when you got saved. So how do you navigate the different expression of your faith?
Well, I think I'm still figuring out, how to navigate the faith and the time and mom and being an entrepreneur and being a wife. It's like I was just sharing with another friend that came in about, because she's like, how's your business is going? I was like, it's going really well. I'm about to hire a bunch of people, but still juggling being a mom. It is a real struggle. But one thing I want to say is, because there was one point where I was like, okay, I don't remember who said it, or someone said that, being a mom and entrepreneur, you feel this pull all the time. And there was one point for a few years ago that I was like, okay, I can't do it. I feel guilty when I work. I feel guilty when I'm with my son. I feel guilty all the time. And then I just felt God spoke to me, talking about, but this is your baby too. So if you treat it like you have, your business is your baby, and you naturally, babies is your babies too, then you just divide the time how you want to nurture them. And that really just put this peace in my heart to work out from another place instead of guilt.
Wow. Wasn't that Ashley who had the dream about the child? And it was a girl and there you
Yes.
go. It's your little baby.
Yes.
So-
When you said that, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what the Lord imprinted in my heart too. And from that day, I just worked differently, and I didn't feel guilty. And I'm like, okay, because I can be a high achiever too. Before I was saved, I was like, oh, I'm going to conquer the world.
Yeah, you're
I'm going to be the best.
you're super driven, super focused, incredibly hardworking. Like an Anna Sorgi type story. You're totally that person. So how do you work differently since then? What does that happy medium look like? Paint a picture for us of being a mom, a mompreneur.
Yeah, so just specifically, I am like, okay, I'm not going to work in my business more than 20 hours per day. No, per day. Per week.
That's must be super disciplined of you, yeah.
Per week. But I also have this drive in me, I'm going to make more money. So working out from that place of peace and having just very specific time management of time, what I focus on.
You do time slots?
I do time slots, and then nothing is going to hinder it. It's just nothing.
So you're an animal on your time management.
So, and then I pray, Lord, make my work, what's the word in English? Tasks lower, but make my income higher. So it made me also help me, for example, figuring out systematic ways of how can I make more money in a shorter amount of time.
One of the things I tell people is, especially small entrepreneurs and solopreneurs who spend their time working in their business, and it's a trap because you're basically selling time for money. Yeah. And what you need to do is work on your business and get other people to work in your business. Yeah. And you can actually make more money and have more clients, but with less time and energy. Yeah. And so that's what you're doing. So it's actually forced you to become a better leader and a better business person. Yeah. So your business skill, in spite of having less time, has actually elevated, right?
With less time.
With less time. Well, of course, because you've figured out how to scale yourself. Wow. That's incredible. So thank you so much. So let's give Vibeke a big hand. That is so good. All right. Last and not least, so Susan, we love Susan. So husband is entrepreneur, and one of the very cool things about Susan and Peter, and their 8 amazing children, is actually, well, the children are actually amazing. They're really They're really, honestly, there's not a lot of families you can look around and say, I wish my kids could be like that, or they're shining. I mean, everybody in the family is just super healthy, and they're just doing so well. And here's one here, that's just amazing, shining godly light, and just so full of Jesus and full of love and health and happiness. And so you've raised 8 children. So you've kind of gone, the stereotypical Christian, right? So I'm 100% mother all the time, full-time homeschooler, right? So talk about the joys and the glory of that, because that's a big deal too.
Sure. It was just interesting listening to all the different stories and the journeys. And, this morning you were like, there might be a mom that's like, she's homeschooling, she has 8 kids, and that's great. What's funny is I'm just not your stereotypical homeschool mom with 8 kids. I've spent a lot of time feeling like I don't really fit in here. I had 1 sibling. And my husband had 1 sibling. So we came into big family like, we have no idea what we're doing right now. We just know we're outnumbered and we got to survive. And we want him to love Jesus. Just let him love Jesus, okay? But I am unique in that I came from a family of teachers, and my husband came from a family of teachers, and he was the weird one that went into business. They're all like, we don't understand you. But I thought, well, I'm just going to be a teacher. It's probably what I'll do. But I heard about homeschooling. Most of my homeschool mom friends are like, you are nuts. I heard about it. I was like, I might actually want to go ahead and get my elementary education degree, because I might need that someday to actually officially homeschool my kids. And, a lot of people have stories of the Lord just making them homeschool and, popping it up. And they're like, no. I'm like, I might want this. And people are like, you're weird. That's very weird. But I think it does come from also just, always feeling like I have that DNA of a teacher. But I was like, if your parent was the main, voice into your life, and you just watching. So my journey of having 1 sibling who's 5 years older than me and autistic, before people knew what autism was, they'd be like, oh, he's artistic. That's great. I'm like, no, I didn't say art. So I was just sharing with Nicole, I grew up, I was the healthy one. I was the one that could speak. I could do the things. And so I grew up, my parents just championed, you're doing all the things your brother couldn't do. And I didn't realize I was adopting this, this performance, I've got to fill the gap. I've got to be what he wasn't. I've got to do all the things. And so this perfectionist chip, my parents were happy with anything I did. They didn't put it in me you've got to be better. They were like, yeah, you did that, about anything I did, because it was so different from what my brother's experience was. So, but what happened was I was like, perfection, perfection, perfection. And then I have this, if I can't do it perfect, I don't want to do it at all. And the Lord in his goodness, what was it Anna said, the Lord will do what he does and, say what he says, and you might as well just get on board. That's a bad paraphrase. But the Lord's like, why don't I give you 8 kids? Let's see how perfectionism
goes out the window.
With 8 children.
The first one you're perfect work on, and then the last one you're like, whatever happens, happens.
Exactly. I'm still raising them. They're not all turned out yet. I've got a 9-year-old. We're still like, please, God, let's hang on.
I remember raising our children. We're like, we kind of know there's no class to go to. So you're raising these kids, basically thinking you have no idea if it's going to work.
Yeah.
Are they going to turn out okay or not? And you only look in hindsight, 20 years later, you say, well, it worked, or boy, it didn't work,
Right.
And so it's working. What would you say? Give us a couple tips on what does it take to raise amazing children? Yeah.
Well, one thing that really, a word that the Lord just shot through was actually Sarah Groves, the singer. I happened to hear her speak once, and at the time she was on the road traveling. Her kids were out in the RV trailer, she was homeschooling them, and she was on tour and, singing, and she was just feeling I'm messing this up. I'm not being a good parent. I'm not fully giving, just feeling torn. And the Lord went way out of his way to tell her, but then also through random strangers, kept saying to her, let me define normal for you. And that hit me in my gut years ago. And the Lord was like, are you listening? And I was like, yes. To not the whole not compare my journey to someone else's, not try to be like so-and-so. I mean, like I said, I don't fit into the whole typical homeschool, and that's not fair. The homeschool world is very diverse and different, but the expectation that, I homeschool, so I must be good at X, Y, and Z. Well, no, I'm good at loving my kids. I just love them, and where I have a weakness, I'm like, Lord, I need your help. I mean, literally leaning on him in the moment. And I keep saying, you help me out with this, Bob, but I was like, I think there's a name for God. I don't know the Hebrew, but it's the filler of gaps. Because in no place will you ever see your gaps like you see when you're like parenting children, and then you're parenting a lot of children and seeing all the need, and there's not enough of you. You can do the math. And the math is, this is not going to work out if you having, like, we're not going to have the daddy-daughter and mother-daughter and son dates every week with 8 kids. It doesn't.
The math doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. So we're like, Lord, you have to show up. Like, you have to show us how to do this. And somehow I feel like that, weak daily yes of like, where do you want me to put my attention today? Who needs my time today? And sometimes that's staying up later than I have possibly, the ability to stay up, but just being there for the kids.
So, Susan, last...
Interject too, and just take a second to honor my mom. Because you taught us to put Jesus first.
And I watched you and Dad make decisions and include us in that and be honest about your mistakes, and you taught us how to be people, And I'm just so thankful. The gift of a big family is that you and Dad couldn't be everything that I needed all the time, but you showed me who could be everything to me that I needed all the time. And I just want to honor you publicly because I'm so thankful you're my mom.
That's awesome. Wow. And all the mothers in the room start crying.
I'm crying.
It's like something goes in the air and every woman starts weeping. So last question, and I think something that is extraordinary about you and Peter especially, and it's this idea that you want to be a family in all of your pursuits. And so, one of the things that you expressed to me, you and Peter expressed to me, is like, we don't want to go to church where they want to separate us from our kids all the time, right? We want to do it with our kids and even business. So we don't want to go and do a business and the kids go do something else. So you actually brought the kids into the business. You bring the kids into your church, into everything. So you want to do literally all of your activities as a family together, and turn all your kids into little worker bees for the family business. It's cheap labor, right? I mean, so talk about your passion there.
Well, when we first started homeschooling, people would be like, so how long are you going to homeschool? And my husband would joke, but say like, well, at least they're their bachelors. And people are like, that's so weird. But my husband's a visionary, of course, and so all these years, since our oldest here was a baby, he was like, there's got to be other systems besides just college. College is not bad, but it's not the only way to learn something. The whole apprentice model and like just learning and being near someone that does something and catching their passion. And so we never knew quite how that was going to work out, but it turned out when our oldest graduated, we were in the midst of launching a startup tech company. And my husband was in the corporate world for years, was suddenly like launching out on his own and fully like starting this business. And we're like, well, we can encourage her to go to college, pay money, get a degree, and then try to find an internship like this. Or we could say, hey, we'll invite you in. It was never a, you must do this. We'll invite you into this process. Do you want to come alongside your dad and the people that the Lord's put around him and watch this happen? And she did.
And it family internship.
Amazing. Yeah.
So that's awesome. All right, let's give these ladies a big hand, all of them.